Okay. Well, hey, everybody, it's Dr. Cadwell, and as always, just want to say thank you for joining us on these calls and either listening to them on the recordings or coming to them live, I guess. As always, I hope that there is of some benefit to you. That's the whole idea here, is to bring you hopefully some additional knowledge to help you sort of think outside the box and obviously continue on your journey to not only the weight that you want to be at, but more importantly your health. And that's really the key at the end of the day. So I'm hoping we're bringing you content that is helpful in that regard, and obviously, like I said, in that journey, and that on some level maybe helps you to think outside the box a little bit. I always say on the radio shows that part of the objective that I have is to begin to challenge the accepted model of healthcare and sort of the accepted idea of what health really is. When in reality, when you step back and look at the model, it's not really helping people regain their quality of life or regain their health. Yes, it may help them in terms of symptom management, but if you really, truly, objectively look at it, you're not seeing people's health, challenges get resolved, see their blood sugar issues get reversed, that sort of stuff. So, and by the way, that's, I'm not here to say that we're treating disease conditions. That's not our job. It's very simple. All we're doing is we're looking at imbalances within a person's body and providing the support that body is requesting. And then obviously with the technology, the great thing is being able to identify the best foods for you and biological preference, whether that's for the fat loss program or whether that's for some other program. So at any rate, it's exciting to watch and obviously a joy for us, and we're grateful for the opportunity to help and or serve you. So I hope that we're doing that. And if obviously as human beings, we are prone to being fallible on making a mistake. If you're not getting an answer to your question, or you're not being assisted, or something's happened, please make sure and let us know so that we can right that for sure. So, all right, before I get going, I'm going to talk a little bit about how different types of fat affect your body. And this kind of goes to the question of is it true that eating fat-free or low-fat foods actually helps you to lose weight? So I kind of want to address that question today. But before I get into it, I want to see if there's any questions about anything else that I can answer first for anybody that needs to get off the call here right away. So please, I'll take a few seconds here. If you have a question, go ahead and ask. Okay. All right. Well, the answer to our question here for today, and that question, I'll repeat it, is it true that eating fat-free or low-fat foods helps you to lose weight? Well, obviously, many of you know the answer is no. And that is something that people have been told to do for quite a number of years. If you remember in the 90s especially, there was this huge fad of fat-free foods, because fat is going to make you fat, and that's just not the truth. So we know that to be the case, but we do want to be conscious of the types of fats that we are bringing into our body, right? So we want them to be good, healthy fats. So there's been some interesting information that's come out on linoleic acid. And linoleic acid is an essential fatty acid, but getting it in terms of how most people are getting it now from refined vegetable oils is beginning to appear that it's creating a multitude of problems, okay? And so I'm going to go into some studies that have been done, or some literature that has come out on this, and try to maybe help you to understand it a little bit more. But the reality is, if you look at this idea that eating less fat or low fat or fat-free foods is going to help you to lose weight, you understand that when you look back, the trend has actually been going in the opposite direction. And so has the prevalence of disease conditions, specifically cardiovascular disease and cancer, as an example. So this article says you might be wondering why America seems to be fatter and sicker than ever before when so much focus is on losing weight and eating a healthier diet. Part of the problem is that one person's idea of healthy is vastly different from another's, and often vastly different from reality. And that is sort of the truth, because in terms of what's perpetuated and spoken and marketed out there in terms of being quote-unquote healthy, you begin to realize that it's not, okay? So adipose tissue, which is the clinical name, if you will, of the fat tissue in our bodies, and that's the brown fat, by the way. We also talk about the white visceral fat, but for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk about adipose tissue, being the fat tissue, is actually a very critical part of our health and our well-being. It's important to our body's function. And our adipose fat does contain blood vessels and nerve cells that are necessary for storing energy and releasing hormones. And also, that adipose fat's going to insulate our bodies, and protect us in that regard as well. And remember, I've talked about in the past how the hormone leptin, which is actually the driver of energy within the body. So all energy is directed through this leptin hormone, and it's actually connected to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is in the hypothalamus as well. And we talk about resetting the hypothalamus. So when you look at the hypothalamic, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal axis, and then the other things that are ultimately affected by dysfunction in those areas, you begin to realize when you're looking at a weight challenge for a person, it's not because, once again, as I've always said, that they haven't found the exact perfect prepackaged frozen foods to eat, or the right point system type program to count points, or the right exercise program to burn just enough calories, or the right form of speed to suppress their appetite. That's not what it's about. What we have to begin to understand is that there's things that are going on within the body that are chemically beginning to create interferences. And we want to begin to be conscious of this so that we can make those decisions whether or not we want to utilize these things, okay? So adipose fat is an important component to our health and well-being, but when it starts to obviously become an issue, in other words, the body becomes very efficient at storing it and building it up, and we start to develop these weight challenges, a lot of things begin to occur. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that it takes about 7 miles of blood vessels, of new blood vessels, to support 1 pound of fat. Okay, that's a lot, right? So for every 1 pound that a person is overweight, that's 7 miles of new blood vessels required in order to support that 1 pound of fat. So even if you're just 20 pounds overweight, 20 times 7 is 200 and what is that? 7 times 4 is 28. 200 and I'm sorry, my math isn't fantastic, but so 20 is 140 miles. So basically about 150 miles of new blood vessels. Now that is going to ultimately create stress on the cardiovascular system, and then just do the math with every pound thereafter that your body has to create new blood vessels. So we want to have that right amount for sure. It's not that we don't want adipose tissue, we do, but when it becomes in excess and the body becomes efficient at storing it, that's where you start to see some of these challenges, okay? So linoleic acid, which is concentrated in seed or vegetable oils, specifically, like corn, sunflower, safflower, canola, these are polyunsaturated fats that are very prevalent in foods today, that many of us are eating. But the way it accumulates in the fat tissue is what's starting to become the issue, because it is becoming more of a pro-inflammatory type chemical, omega-6 type fatty acid versus omega-3. So this gentleman, Stephen Guyanet, neurobiologist and an obesity researcher, has studied what he calls the disturbing trend from pooled resources with another researcher named Susan Carlson from the University of Kansas nutrition facility there, to produce a paper revealing that over the last 50 years, the linoleic acid concentration of fat tissue in American adults has shot upward by a shocking 136%. That research captured criteria from 37 different studies between the years 1980 to 2010, which they said underscored the steady and consistent trajectory over those 5 decades, which continues today. They also found a strong correlation between the linoleic acid we eat and the linoleic acid in our fat tissue. So that's where they began. And just so you know, some of the common forms of linoleic acid besides soybean oil and canola oil are going to be corn oil, like I said, sunflower oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, and peanut oil. And, you know, the sunflower seeds are typically what we would call good fats or healthy, right? But that's because when you eat them as a seed, they're in a whole form, and they have to the chemical and or mechanical processing that's required in order to extract the oils from them, which, you know, unfortunately, by the way, when you look at how that happens, what happens is the seed pulp and the oil are put through a hexane, what's called a hexane solvent bath, which you wouldn't want to take yourself, I'm telling you, but it's produced by the refining of crude petroleum oil. The impurities are then removed by treating the oil with caustic soda, which is sodium hydroxide, or soda salt, which is sodium carbonate. And then finally, it's bleached and then deodorized to remove the impurities and the volatile compounds that would be in existence. Okay, all this chemical concentration renders the product that has been linked to widespread inflammation within the body, elevated blood triglycerides, and an impaired insulin response. Okay, that's what you're beginning to see these things happening. And these dietary linoleic acids, these excess amounts of linoleic acid that we're taking in, are strongly correlated with the risk of coronary heart disease, which you've seen substantially rise since about 1920 as these types of fats became more prevalent in our foods. Okay, so you know what's so bad about vegetable oils? I'm going to read directly from this for you. The irony is that vegetable oils are often referred to as heart healthy, but science doesn't support it. The whole idea was based on shelf life and economics, which is what ultimately started to drive, you guys, by the way, side note, my own comment, the refined food industry, which that book, Salt, Sugar, Fat, goes into, you know, depths on, you know, the right amount of salts, the right amount of sugars, the right amount of fats, all bad sugars, bad salts, bad fats, okay? Vegetable oils remain fluid at room temperature, which adds to its convenience and shelf life, which is good for manufacturers and retailers. So it becomes sort of more of a bottom line thing than it does become a dietary and health thing, okay? Now, another thing that you want to be conscious of, by the way, the side note, is the hydrogenation process of taking something that is typically liquid at room temperature and converting it to a solid. So this is called partially hydrogenated fats, otherwise known as trans fat. Just with how the hydrogen is moved from what's called a cis position to a trans position on the carbon chain. So it's a manipulation of an actual of the molecule itself to get that oil to turn into a solid. This is called partially hydrogenated, or the hydrogenation process. Okay, so so just so you understand that, they make the comment about the hydrogenation process. And another problem that has emerged with the processing of seed oils to create the more solid forms for margarine and shortening, which is another topic, but related to the health problems stemming from the ways vegetable oils are produced. With the adoption of polyunsaturated oils, the natural fats, such as butter, that our forebears were raised on, were cast aside. As America turned to vegetable oils, which are a concentrated source of linoleic acid. And linoleic acid in the body has climbed at a remarkably similar rate to this that go into these disease processes here in just a second. But I want to go back to the butter thing, because we talk about butter as being a healthy fat. And, the key is that you eat butter, but you make sure that it's from grass-fed / grass-finished cattle, okay? So we want to avoid butters and meats that are grass-fed but grain-finished, or grain-fed and grain-finished altogether, which really is tied to the issue that we have with genetically modified organisms and these genetically modified grains that these cattle are eating to get plumped up, and what they're doing to the genetics of these things and how it's affecting not only the animals but ultimately us that are consuming those genetically modified organisms from via. Before 1920, coronary heart disease was rare in America, but during the next 40 years, and by the mid-1950s, heart disease was the leading cause of death among Americans. What happened is the question they ask. During 1910 to 1970, American 83% to 62%, and butter consumption plummeted from 18 pounds per person per year to 4. Now, this in conjunction, I'll be honest with you, with the rise in refined foods that also created a substantial increase in both sugar and the salts and all that stuff that we talked about. It is basically simultaneously happening with all of this. So it sort of becomes this perfect storm where you start to see these issues. And like I said earlier, where they mentioned that these things are actually starting to produce insulin type resistance issues, increase in blood triglycerides, those sorts of things. Once again, becomes a perfect storm for these epidemics that we're seeing in the forms of cardiovascular diabetes and cancer. So why is that happening? This is where I want to encourage you. You got to begin to step back and go, okay, what's really happening here? Is it based on the fact that we were all born with a shortage of some drug running through our bloodstreams, and that's why we're getting heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all that stuff? Well, obviously the answer is no. It's not. It has to do with something that's going on that's getting in and starting to create these issues or these changes to us, okay? So like I said earlier, in an article in Online Today, Healthy Animal Fats expounds on what you get when you choose refined vegetable oils, which require intense processing both mechanically and chemically. And I talked about what that process involved, and it's pretty nasty, obviously. So omega-6s versus omega-3s, what's the difference, okay? So I'm going to read this to you from this article because it simplifies it for the most part. Over decades, changes have taken place correlating to the amount of omega-3 fats, which are EPA, primarily EPA and DHA, and the omega-6 fats we eat. Research indicates our hunter-gatherer ancestors consumed a balanced mix of omega-3s and omega-6s. Fats, and we're largely free of modern disease like heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, which obviously we're all experiencing now in epidemic proportions. Then the Industrial Revolution in the mid-1800s generated a shift toward omega-6 fats and the manufacture of vegetable oils that rose basically with every decade. And today's studies show that the ratio is as high as 25-1 in favor of omega fats. Okay, that's 25-1, 25 in terms of the ratio of omega-6s to omega-1s. Omega-6s in a proportion that high, and even if it's 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, is extremely inflammatory to the body. Okay, so to define polyunsaturated omega-6 and omega-3 fats, poly means many. Okay, so poly, that simple term means many, and references, and basically is a reference to multiple bonds of that particular structure. But because our bodies can't produce them, we need to obtain them via our diets, and that's why they're called essential, which I mentioned earlier. So these essential fatty acids. And and they do play a critical role in our body, from clotting blood to helping with inflammatory issues and so on and so forth. So what do these fake oils do, or what do they start to create in terms of the challenges for our body? Well, the research shows that before 1920, heart disease was a rarity. In 2012, The Atlantic cited a chart published by the New England Journal of Medicine, which lays out the top 10 causes of death from 1900 to 2010. And two things are remarkable. Mortality dropped dramatically overall, but heart disease and cancer soared to the number 1 and number 2 spots. Okay? So, people will say, well, we're living longer. Well, we are living longer than we were 100 years ago. That's true. But if you look at what's happened in that 100 years, and you also look at the quality of life that people are typically having in the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years of their life, you're seeing that quality begins to decrease. And what I've unfortunately made, what I've observed, and I would say is somewhat unfortunate, is that the system in this country has become more about managing sick people. So we've become really the best country at keeping sick people alive. That's sort of what we've become, and that's great on one hand, but on the other, I also look at it from the standpoint of, well, wouldn't you rather have a better quality of life? And if that's the case, then okay, there's ways that you can begin to do that so that you can start to reverse some of these challenges that have been promoted within the body, okay? So from this, they said, let's see, the increased omega-6 fat consumption and the neglect of omega-3s has taken a toll, especially in terms of inflammation and heart disease. They mentioned while Big Pharma and doctors are well aware that patients could simply be encouraged to reduce their omega-6 intake, they instead recommended prescribed drugs and over-the-counter remedies. The breakdown is fairly straightforward. Cancer and heart disease combined sent 18% of the population to their graves, and in 2010 that number jumped to 63%. So that's a pretty big change. And another way to put it is that out of every 100,000 people then and now, the ratio of deaths tips from 20 to 380. So that's a big number, okay, when you start looking at this. And so a few weeks ago, I talked about these hyperglycemic events that people are experiencing because of all the refined foods that they're eating and the sugars that they're getting unknowingly. And then you start to combine, these bad fats that people are consuming from their foods, once again, unknowingly, and it's starting to create insulin resistance type issues, which then, regardless of you eating a high sugar food or not, you start to experience these hyperglycemic events because the insulin that the pancreas releases is not being utilized within the body because of these resistance challenges that's being created. And so, therefore, you're walking around with elevated blood sugars, which starts to perpetuate this inflammatory, chronic, low-grade inflammatory issue within the body, and is the main contributor to heart disease, cancer, and strokes. As a matter of fact, and I've said this numerous times as well, that we know that of the top 10 disease killers in this country, 7 of them are directly related to chronic low-grade inflammation in the body. And that's why this program is so powerful, is because hopefully, if you're a person that is concerned about your health and not just what a number says on the scale, it's great to see that scale go down. I get it, and I'm all for it, and we do get to see that happen relatively quickly. But what I want to emphasize to people is what's even more important is how you feel and, how you're sleeping and your energy levels, and are you feeling like you're in control? Are you now making conscious decisions? Do you understand labels, and the nutrition facts, and then, of course, understanding the ingredients list. So if we go to that nutrition facts label as an example, you may see, just so that you understand this, you may see that there's like 3 grams of sugar or 4 grams of sugar or whatever it is on that nutrition facts label, but you go to the ingredients and there's absolutely no added sugars. Well, those are just natural sugars occurring from, whatever, the tomato, whatever it was. So if it's a tomato sauce or a tomato paste as an example, You'll see in the ingredients that there's no added sugars, but you'll see that there's naturally occurring sugars based on the nutrition facts label. So understanding, are you understanding how to read that? Are you understanding that, the decisions you make around what you put on your head in terms of hair gels or, spray bottles, or on your skin in the forms of lotions or makeups or whatever it is, can begin to over time have an effect on how your body functions, or doesn't function for that matter. In other words, begins to decrease in its functionality and ultimately become challenged. Challenged in terms of weight or blood sugar problems or fatigue issues or digestive problems or hormone imbalances or depression or anxiety or sleep disturbances or whatever it is. This is the way that I want to try to encourage people to begin to think. And, let me just say that once again, and I'm going to say this on every single call, I'm not anti-drug. I mean, drugs can certainly play a very important role to help a person. However, the reality is they're not fixing anything. So while they're helping to maybe manage, the effect of dysfunction for a short period of time, we should ultimately be getting to the root cause of the problem so that the need for that synthetic drug goes away. Because the longer a person has to stay on a drug, the more likely other interferences are going to begin to occur. We call these things side effects. And I used to go over this in my in my group orientation that I would do, where I get this little newsletter from the New England Journal of Medicine, and I remember I got it one month, and I opened it up, and right in the middle was an advertisement, and that advertisement across the top said, do you I'm trying to think of what it said exactly, but it said, do you have, do your patients suffer from drug-induced constipation? It was actually due to pain medications. So the point is that what it was an advertisement for another drug to treat the side effect of another drug. Okay, so if your patients are suffering from that's what it was, is opioid-induced constipation, then here's the drug that they need to take. So the opioids ultimately were causing the constipation. So instead of addressing why the person was having to take the opioid in the first place, which is typically given because of some pain issue, which that opioid ultimately created another problem, which constipation is a problem. It's kind of like you can't take the garbage out. Imagine not being able to ever take the garbage out of your house, or only be able to take it out once every month. It would get pretty nasty. Well, the body's the same way. If we're not having regular bowel movements, whether that's due to some functional issue or whether that's due to a drug that's causing it, then that can start to create other health problems. And you can see how this begins to create a downward spiral for people. So, to ultimately get to the root of the issue is really the most important, key to all of this. Okay, so omega-3 and omega-6 fats have different functions, particularly when it comes to inflammation. As one study termed it, omega-6s can cause inflammation while omega-3s fight it. So when you have a ratio of 25 to 1, you can understand how a person that's consuming that type of ratio in terms of omega-6s might start to see major issues in terms of their triglyceride number. They might start to see major issues in terms of their blood sugar issues. And they may just start to see ultimately a challenge in terms of their inability to lose weight, regardless of what they do. And as a matter of fact, it actually becomes more of a problem in terms of now the body's storing it regardless of what they do. So they made the comment, inflammation is essential for our survival. It helps protect our bodies from infection and injury, but it can also cause severe damage and contribute to disease when the inflammatory response is inappropriate or excessive. And that's the thing, is that most people are living in a very inflamed body. And we get a lot of people that come in that have that fogginess, that they're just not clear in terms of their thinking. And that's really inflammation of your brain. Your brain doesn't have pain receptors, so you aren't going to necessarily feel that pain in the brain, okay? but that's a big indicator there, okay? Now, Guyanet's research on how the wrong fats change our bodies is compounded by the fact that vegetable oil, which weighs in on the omega-6 side very heavily, is found in so many foods, and not just margarine and shortening. It's in crackers, it's in packaged snacks, it's in coffee creamers, it's in fried foods, it's in pre-made baked goods, ready-to-use cookie doughs or bread doughs, pie shells, those are the sort of things that you're seeing this in, okay? And besides the vegetable oil, there are many other pitfalls that throw off the balance your body needs in the world of nutrition. Sugar and soda are two of the biggest problems. But there are other things that can sideline a good nutrition plan. So arming yourself with this information is really what we want to do. I'm not here to make you paranoid. I'm here to give you knowledge. And I think that, knowledge can be power. In this particular case, ignorance is not bliss. In other words, sticking your head in the sand and sort of ignoring it isn't going to get you anywhere long term. And because you're investing, your hard-earned money and your time and all that stuff in this program, it ultimately is truly an investment. When you do it, and you do it exactly as we tell you to, that's where you start to see these really magical things happen. And if you've been in a body that's been challenged for a long time, or you've had to be a person that's had to use a lot of pharmaceutical drugs or over-the-counter drugs throughout the years, then you got to understand that there's some toxic buildup that has accumulated over those years that your body is going to work through. And so just think about it from the standpoint that the loss of health is a process. It typically happens over decades. The restoration of health is also a process. The really cool thing is relatively speaking, you start to see things change really, really fast for people. But what I want to remind you all of is that this is not an event, right? Health is not like this thing that you all of a sudden get and then you're done taking care of it. When you start to take back control of your health and you start to take back control of your weight challenge, this becomes something that you begin to live and you begin to breathe, and all of a sudden you're a totally different person. And it makes sense to you. And now, as I've said before, you become this conscious liver, okay? And living consciously is the key. And what I mean by that is you all of a sudden have taken accountability and responsibility for your own health and well-being, because now you are in control of it and you're not relying upon somebody to write you a script for something to try and manage these awful symptoms that you've had or these challenges that you've had, okay? So, focus on, if you're in phase 2, obviously, we're going to be waiting until phase 4 to bring in these good omega-3 fats, but good sources. My wife actually found these really, really, really good. I don't know if anybody likes sardines, but they're a canned sardine, almost like, chicken or tuna or whatever it is, and she found them at Vitamin Cottage. And I think we're going to try and take a picture of them and put them on our Facebook page. But they have this chipotle-flavored one. It's such an awesome snack. I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off most days, and that has been just so awesome for me to be able to open that up and just eat it. And it's really good. I didn't think that I was a fan of sardines at one point either, but they're really, really good, okay? Of course, wild-caught Alaskan salmon is also a great way. Krill oil, good high-quality krill oil would be great. Use first-pressed virgin olive oil, grass-fed or grass-finished butter, grass-fed and grass-finished butter, like we talked about, and you can and coconut oil, which you all, if you're on the program, know how much we love coconut oil. You're only using it when we tell you to in phase 2, but you want to really use that daily once you move into phase 4 and beyond. Coconut oil is really good to cook with. I want to avoid cooking with olive oil and things like that. And the reason I want to use coconut oil is because it's not going to burn and create other issues that the olive oils will. So try to cook with your coconut oil instead, okay? And then just, get in the habit of reading labels, you guys. Make sure you're reading labels, and understand these terms: partially hydrogenated, trans fats, the hydrogenation process. Avoid high fructose corn syrup. Avoid stuff with added coloring to it, this FD&C yellow or FD&C red or blue or whatever it is. You want to avoid these added colors. I always tell people, one easy way to look at it, if you read a label and you can't pronounce the name of it and you don't know what the heck it is, then you probably don't want to put it in your body, okay? But but also avoid processed foods, including these processed vegetable oils, which we've talked about, and very simply, eat real food. Food is ultimately your medicine, so think about it that way. Good food and good supplementation really become the fuel that your body needs. And I've told many of you I'm a huge proponent of good live food, live source supplementation. I do it every single day. I take way more than any of you probably would ever want to take, but that's my choice, and that's what I choose to do. But I also eat real food. I don't eat fast food. I stay away from the garbage and just don't put it in my body. And once again, that's my choice. So, I just want to encourage you to do the same thing. Take control, and before you put it on your skin, put it in your hair, or ingest it, that, you just ask yourself the question, is this something that's going to help me to become a healthier person and the person that I want to be from that perspective, or could it possibly affect my health in the wrong way? I don't know. And then if it's, it probably may not be the most healthy thing for me, that's not a problem. You deal with the consequences of it, and you do it in moderation. So none of us are perfect, and including me. I have my vices. I do like ice cream, but I try to eat coconut milk ice cream or almond milk ice cream. My wife has a great recipe for coconut milk ice cream, by the way. It's really, really good. But I do have, on occasion, I'll eat ice cream from, like Little Man or something like that here in Denver or one of those places. So, but I know what I need to do in order to deal with it, okay? Moderation is the key. So real food means real fuel for your body versus food-like imitations or food-like substances, which you want to avoid, and that ultimately, in my opinion, start to create and contribute to disease and sickness and poor health and weight gain and all that stuff that, we obviously want to avoid. So all right, I'm going to stop right there, and I'll take any questions. Before I take any questions, just to let you know, I'm going to try and be more consistent in terms of letting you know what I'm going to talk about each week. And next week, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about common heartburn drugs. And what we're seeing as a major side effect of these heartburn drugs being chronic kidney disease. So the kidneys are really becoming affected by these heartburn drugs, and I want you to understand what really is the cause of heartburn or gastroesophageal reflux disease. You might be surprised, so we'll talk about that next week, okay? So, all right, any questions I'll be happy to take.
Hi. I have a question on the coconut oil.
Yes.
So we're supposed to limit saturated fats every day, but coconut oil has really high saturated fat. So how do we manage that?
Well, who says you're supposed to limit saturated fats?
Well, everything I've read is saturated fat is bad.
Right, and what I just went over here, too, is everything says that vegetable oils are heart healthy, and we found out just the opposite. So it's not the saturated fats that are going to be the problem, okay? So it's the trans fats that are going to be the issue, the partially hydrogenated fats that are going to be the problem, okay? So there's plenty out there showing the health benefits of sorry, is there another question getting answered? I think someone's chiming in here. So no, I'm not concerned whatsoever about the saturated fats in coconut oil.
Okay.
Okay. So just read your labels and avoid, okay? So you want to avoid, like I said, those trans fats and those partially hydrogenated fats, or just anything that talks about the hydrogenation process itself, okay?
Okay.
And then just make sure that once again you're staying away from things that are driving these hyperglycemic events, these things that start to perpetuate elevated blood sugars in the body. And thank you for asking this question, by the way, because that's the one thing that this information is showing. You see, when we were back in the day when we were consuming more animal fats, more butters, and more of these unprocessed type meats, we didn't have the incidence of disease and sickness that we have now. So when you look at coconut oil or olive oil or grass-fed and grass-finished beef or chicken or any of that stuff, you will see higher rates of poly and monounsaturated fat and saturated fat, okay?
Okay.
So those things are going to be A-okay. We want to give the body those good fats. So, okay?
Thanks.
Hi. I'm wondering, I live in eastern Colorado, so getting into Denver and to the office is sometimes a challenge for me. Is there a way for me to get supplements other than coming into the office?
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. Yes, we will happily have the office put them in a FedEx or UPS and have them shipped to you. So
okay, so I just need to call the office.
Yeah. If you want to just reach out to them and ask them, what we do is we send those, just so you know, because you're going to spend a little bit more on shipping through FedEx or UPS, but the reason we do that is because the Postal Service radiates all of their boxes or all of their products, okay?
Oh, okay.
UPS and FedEx does not do that. So we don't want to radiate these things. Remember, they're live foods, they're whole source products, so we don't want to expose them to radiation, okay?
Okay.
So, but yeah, the office will be happy to do that. So thank you for asking.
Excellent. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I haven't been able to be on the call the last couple of weeks. Is there anything, any updates on Nutrimost for Life?
Yes, there are. So we actually, did you just ask about getting the supplement sent?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you call them, please give them your name. I don't want you to do that on this call, but if you don't mind, give them your name and the best number to call you at, because we're going to be getting ready to begin to do that, and we're going to call everybody that's interested so that they can participate. We've got a lot of people that are really ready to go, and I apologize that it's taken us so long, but unfortunately, part of it has been the legal component of what we're doing. We had to actually change the name of it, so it's a long story. But at any rate, we had to get all this stuff kind of right. So we're just about ready to get it going. So it's very exciting. It's going to be a game changer. I'm really super excited about it. So
excellent. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I want to mention this too before is that I want to encourage you. I do a couple of radio shows. I do a radio show on 760 AM talk radio, to Denver Sports at 760 AM. It plays on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And this week I have another really good guest. His name's Jeff, who has done absolutely phenomenal. But I just want to encourage you to listen and listen to these other people, because I know there are a lot of you who have struggled with other things. And 2 weeks ago we had Lauren on, who's a type 1 diabetic who has had absolutely incredible things happen in her life through this program. And Lauren, like many people, had done a multitude of things to not only try to lose weight, but to try and minimize her need for pharmaceuticals and to decrease her insulin dosages, because as a type 1 diabetic, the key is the less insulin you have to use, definitely the higher quality of life you're going to lead and the less challenges you're ultimately going to have. And that's exactly what's happened to her. So that was really cool. Jeff's story was really cool. So if you're on this and you've been through the program and you want to share your story, will you just reach out to your liaison and let her know that and what it is I'd love to bring you on the show with me. All I do is I ask you questions. It's really fun. We actually record it, so it's not live. I record it and then we play it on Saturdays. But it's a lot of fun, and and the thing is that your story means way more when it's coming from you than it is from me. And I've literally got thousands of stories that I could tell. Many of them none of you would believe me. But that's because I would be telling it, and you would look at me differently than the person that should be sharing it. So what we're trying to do is really get people to share their stories. And the reason is, as many of you know, our mission is to create a solution to really start to offer true health care and to give people something that helps them to take back control of their own lives. And I think that we found that. And I think the other thing that's really beautiful about this is that it's only going to get better. I mean, we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly going to look at how do we make this better and better and better. And that ultimately is what Nutrimost Forever is going to be, or is about, I should say. It's going to be an awesome, awesome program that really everybody will be able to do. So I'm just so excited about what we're doing and where we're going, and just all the lives that I'm seeing improve. It's just it's such a great thing to watch. So, and then the other radio show I do is on Flow 107.1. That one's a little bit earlier. It's on at 7 in the morning on Saturdays on 107.1 FM. And I actually do that show with one of their radio talents who did the program. He's got a great story. He did it with his boss at work, and it was fun to work with those guys. We're actually getting another one of their radio talents that's starting the program. He happens to be one of 5 DJs in the world that got picked to go to Rio de Janeiro for the Olympics, to be a DJ for the Rio Olympics. So that's pretty cool. His day one is actually today, so we're really excited to work with him and watch his transformation too. So, so we're building, we're seeing lives change, and you guys that have done the program all know that you were once in the position of a lot of people that are investigating this or looking into it, and my request is that you share your story, and I think we can help more people. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop there. I'll see if there's any last questions, and if not, I'll let you all go. But please ask if you have any questions.
Dr. Cadwell, do you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, sir.
I'd like to ask you a question about an all-steak day. You said that if you did that too often, you might get weak. What do you mean by that?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. You talked about in your book about an all-steak day, nothing in the day, and then have steak at night.
Correct,
You said if you do that too often, you might get weak. What do you mean by that?
Say, do that once a week? Is that what you said?
Yeah, if you do it once a week, you talked about you'd get weak.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't be something that you should have to do. You don't necessarily want to do it every week. I mean, if you're in phase 4 or beyond, a steak day is basically, it's the largest. You can eat the biggest steak that you can find, as big as you want to eat, and you do that. I tell people do it with an organic tomato versus the apple. I just think the tomato works better for it.
Okay.
But it's the largest steak that you can eat, along with that organic tomato, and that's all you eat throughout the day. So you don't eat breakfast, you don't eat lunch. Obviously, you just have the steak and you have the tomato. Now, obviously, drink your fluids, take your supplements, whatever it is that you're doing throughout the day. That's certainly okay. All right.
But you talked about if you did this too often, you'd get weak.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't. It wasn't designed. It's not designed to have to be used. Every week. Okay.
I got you. Okay.
So it's designed to be a tool that helps. You see, as you go through this process, remember we're resetting neurotransmitters, we're resetting hormones. You're actually resetting the master controller, which is the hypothalamus. If you eat a food or you've brought in some food sort of unknowingly that have some of these chemicals that we've talked about here the last few weeks, or these refined oils, or sugar, or you eat a trigger that causes your weight to go up, the steak and the tomato work really well to help reset that neuroendocrine memory. So the body has developed a neuroendocrine memory, and so it just helps to reset it, and then all of a sudden brings that weight set point back. It brings that weight back to that weight set point. Okay. So it's sort of like resetting the thermostat. So it's pretty neat in terms of how it works.
Good, okay.
So I will utilize them. Let's just say I have a crazy day. Like I'll tell you, I did an apple day myself on Tuesday this week, and because I knew it was going to be a crazy day, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do an apple day today, and that's what I did. And but I haven't done an apple day probably in, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 months. It's been a long time. And I didn't do it to lose weight, by the way, but I did. I lost about 4 pounds overnight doing that apple day. But that was too light for me. I ended up, I ate about 7 or 8 apples that day. But just sort of how warm. So I put on another 2 because I didn't want to lose that much, and I wasn't like overweight or anything. I will use the apple day or the steak day on days that I know I'm going to be crazy busy and I may not have a chance to eat the way that I would like to eat. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was doing this once a week, and you said you would get weak if you did this, and I kind of thought that physically I didn't know what the physical weak meant. So
yeah, no, I don't want you to do it weekly. You don't want to be doing that. One thing that you can do though periodically is maybe if you look at out of the month is maybe take 2 days a week that you don't eat breakfast, or 3 days a week and you don't eat breakfast. There's a lot of benefit from doing that morning fast. Okay. In terms of the liver support, for sure, it does help the liver to cleanse and heal and clear. But it also helps to put the body into fat burning for the day too.
Okay.
So if someone eats breakfast and they get sugar in the morning, or they eat, fruit mid-morning or something like that, they may put their body into a sugar-burning mode for that day, which could carry into the next day potentially. So instead of doing a steak day, sometimes it's better just to skip breakfast for a few days a week and see how you feel doing that, and then try to make up those extra calories with lunch and dinner. Okay?
Yeah, good. That's what I needed to know. I appreciate the info.
So, okay, you bet.
Good. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay. All right. If there's no other questions, I'll let you guys go. Thanks as always for being on the call. And if you're willing to share your story, please just email your liaison and let her know, and we'll be in touch, and we'll have some fun doing the radio show. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for everything.